Happy Marnie's Day. I want to talk about The Witcher and Henry Cavill. Now, I've watched the development of the Witcher series from a perspective of someone who, during lockdown, finally took people's advice and played Witcher 3 Wild Hunt on the back of the release of season 1 of The Witcher, which it did a fantastic thing in. You had that twist about the timelines, and in general, other than some, I don't know, gripes from fans about the way they cast some of the characters, was generally well received, other than some, I don't know, some costume issues and stuff. Wasn't a major issue as far as I was concerned. So during the course of playing Witcher 3, I've done a couple of playthroughs. The first playthrough following the natural course of Geralt's journey and his love interest for Yennefer, and not having delved into the books at that time. And when I finished that first playthrough, I did a second playthrough where it was, okay, let's pursue the love interest with Triss, see how that goes. And then I started reading the books. So the first couple of books are just a collection of short stories, which are great, they're entertaining. You get that sort of aspect of the relationship between Geralt and Yennefer, and its abusive traits. And naturally, I then got the short story books out of the way to get to the 5-book series, which is the main source for the Witcher TV show by Netflix. When we talk about Henry Cavill reaching the end of his path, I expect, like any good business person, he committed so far to the show to see how it developed, and probably gave himself, or his agent gave him, a get out clause. And it's interesting that he'll be completing season 3 and hanging up his swords, or whatever term you want to use for him stepping away from the role that he loves. He has read the books, he has played the game. Because really, if the show was sticking to the story, then probably book 3 is the last, and this is my opinion, is the last decent book in that 5-book series. And it ends on quite a dramatic ending, which I can already, if they keep to that to some extent, there'll be a way of explaining the change of lead actor. Though I do expect a lot of social media memes about it. And I don't want to go into spoilers in case you haven't read the books and want to enjoy whatever happens. As I have learned, perhaps the hard way with Rings of Power, people taking good source material and then ruining it is not fun. And we have these rumours that obviously the writers behind the Witcher show are openly sort of detesting the books. I can understand. Now, Henry Cavill has become a seasoned sort of actor in high demand. So he's not going to say anything negative, I don't think, about the show or anything that would ruin the development of or the continuation of his career. I suspect he's probably had this. He committed to 3 seasons with the option to pursue other work if, you know, the show writers didn't do what he expected. It's fair to say with season 2 of The Witcher, they've already gone off canon, and that comes down to how they are building their story and if they're including Witcher 3, the Wild Hunt sort of story. If they are doing that, then that is a wise decision. Mainly because books 4 and 5 are very poor. Again, it's difficult to sort of go into it too much without giving spoilers, but there is a very definite shift in narrative and how the characters are involved in the story in books 4 and 5 that, for me at least, was hard work to finish reading them and pressed upon my ability to be ingratiated within the story in a way that was... I started questioning it because there's certain points in book 4 in particular, that you get these characters come into the story, you have a sort of timey-wimey variation, and you have historians commenting on the story from 100 years in the future, hundreds of years in the future, and the author starts to sort of grandiose, makes the story sound that it's far greater than what it actually is. In particular, it's these historians that start saying that the love story between Yennefer and Geralt is like the greatest love story ever told, and it's not. I mean, it's not. It's an abusive relationship, and I'm at that stage now, having played the Witcher 3 game, that Yennefer is awful. I mean, and it's keeping to her character, as you see in the books. So to sort of go away from the canon makes sense, and to sort of lean towards sort of what they do in Witcher 3 really resolves all the story arcs far better, in my opinion, than the books do. In fact, the books... you have a final confrontation, as should be expected, in the 5th book. However, it's more a moment of personal development, a moment of confronting some personal demons than actual demons or anything that really brings about a happy resolve. And then it kind of ends with sort of, I don't know, an underwhelming level of stupidity. In my opinion, you can disagree. That's okay. What we don't get is any true resolve with the Wild Hunt, which is where the game excels and conclude story arcs properly. So I imagine they've made some decisions to sort of cut through some of the bullshit and to bring all this story together, and with the hope of getting to season 5, what should have been book 5, but maybe towards the conclusion we get in the game rather than the books. I guess the really coming back to Henry Cavill, I understand wanting to stay true to the narrative, true to the author, true to the world. But also, I say it's like after book 3, books 4 and 5, it's Ciri's story and not Geralt's. It's, I mean, pretty much for probably three books, including what should be season 3. Geralt is just wandering around, not really doing much. Has a couple of cool moments. I mean, I would love to see the moment that Geralt becomes a Knight of Rivia. How he earns it is pretty awesome. But we have this sort of non-story, and then sort of, rather than anything making sense, while we're focused on Ciri's story, especially in book 5, Geralt's nowhere near the place where the story concludes, and then he is, and it made me a little bit mad when I read it, because it was lazy storytelling, in my opinion. I think that's the thing, it's in my opinion. However, I feel Henry Cavill is cherry-picked to some extent, wisely, to commit to 3 seasons, with probably the option to step out if the adaptation is not going the way he expected, and it's not gone the way he probably expected, and so has bowed out gracefully. It'd be nice to see if that has any effect on the show writers. However, as we saw with season 2, they've gone their own path in many ways, and I don't know, they've made some changes, some major changes. I guess for me, it'll always be Eskel should not be dead. And that's a pretty big change. So we're just going to have to wait and see what happens. I think let Henry Cavill go. He was a good Geralt. But I do think he's bowed out at the right time without sort of compromising his values, and it's refreshing to see to some extent when you got someone who loves the source material and seeing that source material being sort of disregarded. That's a little bit hard to say, because obviously I wasn't satisfied with the source material, and I would expect it to be changed, and for season 5 of The Witcher to conclude with a confrontation against the Wild Hunt. Whether they do that or not, I don't know. Which is good, because, knowing the story and having something that's not quite the story is good in itself. I can understand a desire to project a different sort of arrangement to a story if you are adapting it. I just think you need to keep to some core rules, and it's one of those things, and I don't want to bang on about it, that they didn't do with Rings of Power. And it's, in preparation for making this video, it's one of those things that, to some extent, I am relieved that we haven't had any adaptations of Michael Moorcock's work. Obviously, there's lots of influences of his work in other fantasy shows, and the same goes for David Gemmell. I think I could easily step into a number of conversations with friends about how we'd love to see these things brought onto, the big screen or a TV series, but we want it to be faithful. We want to see the characters as they are meant to be, and not be sort of twisted beyond recognition, or sort of deep sort of characteristics of them sort of being disregarded for something that these writers want to put in of their own interpretations. And I guess it's always going to be subjective and controversial, and not know where to go with it. It's just I suppose, the danger of the transformation from being a book that feeds your imagination to a visual show that shows you, and can't always translate all the things like thought and feeling in a successful way. And I think, to be fair, even Peter Jackson made changes that I disagree with the Lord of the Rings trilogy. However, I think in many ways he kept to the spirit of the story rather than completely disregarded it. I think it just really comes down to sort of, respect, and that has to work both ways. There's a lot of things with Geralt that are uncomfortable to read. I mean, especially when you sort of get into the books. He is a victim of the sorceresses. And maybe there's a message there. It's just, I don't know. He is used. And I say, I don't like Yennefer. It's nothing against even the actress in the show. She's just an awful character. She's an awful person. And Triss is different in a way that's perhaps not so underhand, but it's still sort of, I don't know. What I would have really liked to have seen is Geralt being a relationship that's a bit more balanced. But that's probably another matter, and I'm going off topic. Henry Cavill did a great job. I mean, everyone was sceptical when he was cast, and everything, and he's delivered. And now he's stepping aside, and that's a shame. However, I think there's something to be learnt from this, that if you go off canon, then any actor worth their salt is entitled, or should be cautious enough when committing to an adaptation, to have a way of getting out of it if they need to, if it's not what they expected. And it is something I would expect to see in the next year or two concerning Rings of Power. I think that will damage careers because of how bad that is. Is this going to kill The Witcher? I don't know. There's a lot of fans. There's a lot of people who like the story, so I may very well be in a minority. I accept that. It is my opinion. That's fair enough. Changing the lead actor, this is a big move. We'll see. We'll just have to see. Anyway, thank you. If you've watched this, do take care and goodbye.